So today we have a slightly different property from the other two that we've already seen. It's much older. So this is actually a 17th century Tudor cottage. It is a grade 2 listed building. We can see that we've got the timbers here that of the original construction. Also our windows themselves, they're the original timber windows. So we do need to be aware that certainly from when we're looking at the property itself, the significance values are going to be elevated compared to the other two properties that we've seen so far. We can also see that the brickwork itself is tending to bow outwards, which you would kind of expect from a property this age. It would have moved over time. And so that would be potentially an area that we would need to flag up as part of our condition report. In terms of the context of the building, we know that this is a mid-terrace property. To one side, we have similar Tudor-style properties. To the other, we have a newer construction, brick construction, that's probably a Victorian or something similar to that. We've had a look around the property itself. We know that it's close to a main road. Because it's grade 2 listed, we wouldn't be able to do anything on the outside of the property anyway, but it also comes straight onto the pavement. So again, it wouldn't be a possibility of thinking about putting any measures on the outside of the building. So once we've had a look at the building, we've had a look at the roof space, we've had a look at the context, we're going to continue by moving inside the property and having a look around in there. I've come through straight into the living room, so the front door opens into the house itself. There's no corridor or anything like that, which is kind of what you would expect for a property of this age. We're in the living room itself. We can see that we've got the original features in here, so the timbers above my head, also the main supporting timbers as well. The party wall in this particular instance behind me is also a part of the original features, so there's not been anything that's been added to the walls to make them more energy efficient. However, it is worth noting that the window in particular, the front window that we have here, has secondary glazing installed. So there have been some measures already put in place. In this particular example, it's just a single glaze, secondary glazing, but it does give us that added benefit of reducing not only the energy loss out through the windows, but reducing some of the noise from the main road as well that's immediately in front of us. We know the property is heated via mains gas because we have the mains gas meter in this part of the building as well. We've also got a radiator behind me, and that's got a thermostatic radiator valve connected to it. So we know there's a level of control that's been applied into the property as well. The original fireplace, we've got the ingle nook in place, but the fire has been taken away. There's a room heater, closed room heater, potentially solid fuel or maybe wood, but it's not actually connected at the moment. I know that other ones in the property were originally mains gas, but the gas has been capped off. So they're not in use at the moment, although they are flued and sealed to the flue at the moment. The other thing to note is the floor construction. Now, there's a little bit of a contention over this potentially, but certainly from the testing that I've done so far, it feels like it's a solid floor with a floating chipboard floor on top of that. And so that might have been a replacement from the original floor that would have potentially been a suspended timber floor. But it's difficult to tell, unfortunately, in this particular construction. So what we'll do now is we'll move through to the kitchen. So we've moved through to the kitchen now, and this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting, because we've seen that the front of the property, as we know, is a 17th century construction, but there is evidence here when we get to the rear of the property that there's been some additional work being done to the building, particularly when we're thinking about the walls on the back of the house that might well have been replaced from the original single skin brick that we had, possibly now to a cavity wall construction. And we can see that particular evidence when we're looking at the single glazed window that we have immediately above the kitchen sink. The reveals for that are much deeper than what we've seen at the front of the house already, which would indicate that maybe we've got this cavity wall construction that's been put in place. Certainly from the tap test that we put in place, there's no signs of plasterboard or anything like that. So it looks as though we do have that newer type of construction in this particular location. The other thing to note is that we've now got a change in the ceiling height as well. Either side of this particular beam, to my left, we've got the original ceiling height that's been running through from the living room, But on the other side of this, the ceiling has been raised. Now, this might be just a part of the original construction, but it might also have been a later change potentially. So if we're thinking about it from an energy performance point of view, this part of the building would then be considered a separate extension, because effectively it's just a single story. And we can tell that when we look on the outside of the building that we've got this cat slide roof. So the roof line comes right down to the top of the kitchen, whereas at the front of the property it extends the eaves in line with the first floor bedroom. We do have the stairs up in this particular location as well. We also have a fireplace, although that's not in use. The flue has been sealed off at the top here, but also the chimney is no longer in existence above the kitchen either. We've also got our gas boiler, condensing combi boiler. We know this from looking at the pipework and also from the fact that there's no hot water cylinder anywhere within the property. So I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to move through into the new bit of the property, which is the exit door to the outside, but also we've got the bathroom that's been built on the back of the house as well. This is the bathroom, and as I said when I was talking about it in the kitchen, this is part of a new extension that's been added to the back of the property. We know this because the walls are much thicker than the front of the property. We also have a double glazed window here as well. Although it's still timber construction, we don't know exactly when it was installed either. I've checked the fencer certificates and there doesn't seem to be anything for this particular property. We're looking around the bathroom itself. We do note that there's an extract fan here. It's an intermittent extract fan, so it works when the light switch is on, and then it has an overrun of about 10 minutes or so before it then goes off. There's no trickle vents or anything like that in the double glazed window, so we're relying on the natural ventilation that we're seeing as we're walking through the property. Other things to note, we do have a mixer shower above the bath, so that would be something that would have to go down on our energy performance when we're thinking about the energy assessment. We have a radiator in here as well that again has a TRV connected to it. There's no signs of condensation or mold growth. There's a little bit of mold at the bottom of the bath, but it's not very much. It's only a very, very small amount, and it's certainly not something that we would worry about. There's nothing on the walls or in the floors or anything like that that would concern us potentially when we're thinking about the condition of the property. So now we've had a look around the downstairs, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move outside and have a look at the back of the property and pick up some of the features that I've mentioned so far, thinking about not only the original construction and the significance values associated with it, but also having a look at what potentially we might pick out from this new build as well. We've moved to the back of the house where you can see what I was talking about in terms of the construction details for the rear of the property. We can see that the wall here is a cavity wall construction. We've got stretcher bonds across the whole thing. Also, judging by the wall thickness as well, it looks as though it's a much later construction. No signs of drill holes or anything like that would indicate post-construction filling. So it might be that, again, it's difficult to date exactly when it was done. No signs of evidence in terms of the age of the property, but the thickness of the walls would indicate it's probably at least 1970s, maybe even later. Also, we've got the rear exit door, which is a stable style door, so it has a top and bottom that open separately. We can see also from the back of the property here, we've got our electric meter as well. Now, the reason I said that we need to consider the rear of the property and certainly that exit area as well as the separate extension is because we've got a flat roof. So again, that would indicate that we've got a later construction, certainly later than the main part of the building. If we look at the main part of the building, we can see the cat slide roof now in a bit more detail, where the tiles come all the way down to the top of the kitchen. And so that would indicate that that's probably part of the original construction. The tiles themselves are in reasonably good condition, but they are a bit mossy in places. Potentially we've got older tiles that are being used in that place, so they might even be the originals. They are quite thick, certainly thicker than you'd see in the modern replacement slate tiles. Another point to mention is when we look down the side of the alley between the two properties, between this property and the neighbouring property, we can see where there starts to be a change of brickwork and where brickwork repair has been undertaken. particularly when we're looking at the rear kitchen wall. We can see again stretcher bonds, but as we move round the corner into the alleyway between the two buildings, we can see the signs of headers in there as well, which would indicate again that this part of the house has been a later replacement or potentially repair from the original construction. So that's pretty much it now for downstairs. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take the stairs from the kitchen up to the first floor. We're going to stop halfway up the stairs on the first floor because I want to show you what's happened when we're talking about that cat slide roof. So we come back into the house, halfway up the stairs thereabouts, and the reason I wanted to flag this up was because, as we noted when we were talking about the outside of the property, we've got that cat slide roof, which means that above the kitchen there is this blank storage space. So there's access to that at that point, and so that will allow you to store a few bits and pieces above the kitchen. Hence the reason why we would consider this part of the kitchen as a separate extension, because it has a different thermal performance from the rest of the property, as we'll see a little bit later. The other thing to note is that the stairs themselves are again replacements from the original, so these timbers are not part of the original construction. We can see from the timber that we've got here, where the slots have been cut, that was probably the original stairwell. We can also see that this is still part of the original building because we have the original timbers both above my head and also to the side of the walls here, and the wall itself is beginning to bow out again, which you would expect from a property of this kind of age. A little bit of cosmetic damage that we do need to be aware of. So there's a bit of a crack underneath this particular timber, but that's only just on the surface. It's nothing more than that. It's just a bit of plasterboard that's potentially broken at that point. But I'm going to continue up the stairs into the first floor and have a look at our main bedroom. The first floor of the property has been given over entirely to the main bedroom. We know we've moved back into the original part of the building now because there's no straight lines anywhere. So we can look at the ceiling, we can look at the floors. Floors slope one direction, ceiling slopes the other. The other thing that we need to be aware of is we've got these big timbers that are part of the original construction, and there's obvious signs of woodworm. However, we suspect that's historic. There's certainly no signs of sawdust on the floor at all, and certainly when you've got an infestation this bad, you couldn't leave it untreated. So something would have to be done to it to make sure that we're not running the risk of the timbers collapsing at any point in the future. We've also got the original fireplace. It's a stone fireplace this time, much larger in construction, much heavier potentially as well. There is a room heater in there. It is a mains gas heater. However, the gas has been capped off. The flue has been sealed into the chimney, so we know that it's not going to be used any time soon. Other points that we need to bear in mind when as I said, when we're thinking we're moving back into the older part of the property. Again, we've got our single glazed window to the front of the building. It's got secondary glazing in there, just again UPVC, single glaze at that point, just to give us a little bit of additional thermal performance. We've got a radiator in this room as well, again with a TRV attached to it, so we've got that level of control. There's also a room thermostat that we noted in the kitchen on the way up, and so we do need to be aware of that as well. So when we're thinking about our energy performance and our energy survey, we would put down the controls as programmer, because that's on the boiler itself, TRVs and room thermostat, and that would be the way that we would potentially record this. Other than this, the decor is in pretty good condition. There's nothing that we would need to worry about necessarily from a condition report point of view, apart from the fact that the walls, as I said, nothing is straight in this particular room, so that the walls do bow out a little bit. We do have a bowing in the ceiling as well. The only potential cause for concern that we've got is there is a slight staining above the drape that's immediately above the main bed. What the cause of that is difficult to tell without a little bit of further investigation. It might just be purely cosmetic, it might be a water ingress, so we do need to just check out, make sure that everything's working from that point of view. Now before we finish, there's one more surprise for this particular property, and that is that the stairs continue upwards. So above this room we have a room in the roof. It's unlikely it was part of the original construction, certainly from what we can see when we've had a look in that particular room, as we'll see in a few minutes' time, that it doesn't look as though it's a later addition. And we'll have a look at the details of that when we move upstairs. So I'm going to take that staircase up there now. This is the final room of the dwelling, and we've moved up to the very, very top of the property now into this room in the roof conversion. Now, as I said, I think this is a later construction than the rest of the property, although we've got the original timbers that we can see here. The staircase that we came up, that's actually winds its way around the existing chimney breast. So the stone chimney breast that we saw on the first floor continues all the way up to the roof space and up to the chimneys at the top of the building. But the staircase itself has kind of been fitted around that to some extent. There's also the issue that we know that the walls themselves at this point, they're plasterboard constructions that we're able to hear. We do have a dormer, however. Again, we think that's a later construction because of the way that it's been put together, and certainly when you look at it from the outside, it doesn't necessarily sit in with the roof line. Again, we've got a single glazed window with secondary glazing, single glazed secondary glazing, give them a little bit of privacy in terms of the noise levels, but also a bit of energy efficiency as well. Other points to note in this building, in this room, well, we know that we've got a radiator here, again with a TRV associated with it. We've also got a couple of access hatches to some storage area behind this stud wall, but we do know there's no insulation in there, both at the joist height behind the doors, but also on the walls themselves. There's also a bit of cosmetic damage by the entrance to one of the two cubby holes, as we can see just above the radiator. Other thing to note, we do have a loft hatch immediately above our head as well. We've been able to get up in there, although the space is very restricted. It's only a very small amount of residual loft that's left. And there is some insulation, about 200 millimeters of rock wool insulation. So they've actually done a good job of putting the insulation up there. There are one or two other bits of cosmetic damage that we know of. There's a bit of a crack above the entrance door as we came in. To be fair to the original builders of the loft extension, they've done a good job with trying to blend in any additional plaster they put in into the look and feel of the original property. So the plaster has a slightly rougher finish to it than you would expect if it was a newer construction, and that's very evident when we look above the door frame that there's a slight chamfering of the plaster finish, and so it's actually been a good job in terms of the work that they've done in making sure that fits in with the look and feel and the aesthetics of the rest of the property. So that's it for this building. We've had a look around the building. We've had a good idea of its context, its condition. We've looked at the ventilation of the property as well in terms of its extract fan that we know sits in the bathroom at the back of the property. The windows themselves we've had a look at. Again, they're the original glazing, but we do have that secondary glazing in most places. One thing to also note is that we do have low energy light bulbs in the vast majority of the light fittings. There's just the one above the kitchen, the cooker in the kitchen, which is a halogen light bulb. Everything else is at low energy. So that's completed the tour of the property. As you can see, it has one or two little quirks associated with it, but hopefully it's given you a bit of an idea of what we would need to think about when we're thinking about looking around an older building, in this case a Grade 2 listed Tudor cottage.